Well, welcome to the Boardroom Podcast. Justin Ternes, the founder of Dark Arts Surf. It's been a long time since we chatted. I want to say at least a couple of years, maybe before COVID even. A lot's been going on, but why don't we give the listeners a little background on you? Where'd you get your start? Who are your mentors? How did you get into this surfboard building career?
Yeah, you want me to chip away at it?
Yeah, whatever makes sense to you.
Okay. I basically started out when I was about 19 and just excited about surfing and surfboards, and got a job at just a poly shop that does production, and just kind of started at the bottom, and I didn't know anything. And I think that was around 99. And that was kind of the beginning. And then, just literally worked every day at that shop and soaked up as much knowledge as I could from everybody that would come in and out, but it's just, and the innate interest in surfboards and how they're made. And I guess as a kid, I was always interested in, how things work and making things. So if I'm really interested in something, I kind of get obsessed about it, and then I go down like wormholes. And this has been just a big one for me.
Well, as you look back on your career, and I know you've got a lot ahead of you as well, but if there was one person that was super important, that was like vital to either mentoring you or to just giving you some bit of information or stoke, is there one person that you can point to? And maybe there isn't, maybe there's not one person.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think looking back, I was really young, and I come from a really small little town called Hamul, and I grew up on a dirt road, and, I wasn't around a bunch of people, as a kid. So I guess people were impressionable, and I learned a lot about just being around people at that age. Like, I was kind of just thrown into the mix of like how humans work. So, the guy that owned the poly shop, Brian Jones, he was a character and an interesting person, but he was like so like business kind of crazy and just interesting to me. I guess as far as business goes, he was the first one. And then from there, shapers were always interesting. And then once I started working with Firewire, I really got thrown into the mix of like, this is how like corporate business people think. And then, it was just a learning crash course in humans and business all the way from the beginning. So I guess there's a few people, but I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, that does, but let's talk a little bit about your time at Firewire, because as I recall, you were doing layups. At the time, Firewire was building custom surfboards. They had a factory here in San Diego, didn't it?
Yeah. And that was the real eye opener, was that beginning with Firewire, when Dan and I were basically just kind of making them out of his shop off of Pacific Highway. We went from a poly-based kind of shop to, wrapping EPS blocks with balsa wood rails, and then vacuuming sandwich construction over that, and then glassing it. Like, literally, that whole process to me was just like, wow, this is a trippy way to make a surfboard, and then riding them and then just feeling them bend under your feet and move differently. Like, that was like, all right, there's a whole nother element to this thing that I had no idea about, from just being in the poly world. And then that was just a wormhole, I was like, okay. And that's when it started, kind of,
Yeah. And so for the listeners, you're referring to Dan Mann.
Yeah.
And yeah, this must have been a 180-degree flip from just like laying up polyboards sort of in the standard way to all of a sudden we're doing things completely different. And in some regards, that sounds like it was an important stepping stone for you.
Yeah, it was. And, I guess that going back to the last question of, who would make the biggest impression on me. And I would say Dan Mann, for sure, as just a person, the way he thinks, who he is as a person he taught me so much about how to, let go of like perfectionism and just a radical way of thinking. I mean, he's definitely been probably my biggest influence, and how I think and how I approach things in making things, his influence is heavy on me for sure. I would say that.
And as you sort of referred to, probably one of the nicest guys in the surf industry, if not just in the entire earth. He's such a good guy, Dan Mann.
He is. He's a great guy. And I to this day, we stay in touch, and he's come out to the house and we hang out, and yeah, he's a great guy. Really cool guy.
Let me switch gears a little bit. We spoke last week, and you were off to the Surf Ranch Pro, getting geared up for it. What's your take on the Surf Ranch Pro? It's finished up. We have two champions, Carissa and Griffin Colapinto. What was your experience like there?
That's a good question. It was interesting. There's a ton of action there, man. It was the weirdest thing. It's like you show up and it's in this little town, and there's a dirt parking lot, and then you walk in and it's just like, I actually came from Vegas the night before. I had to play some music in Vegas, so I had a super long drive, but coming from Vegas and then walking into that place, it kind of had a similar Vegas vibe. Yeah. It was so strange. There was people, at the bar, and there's giant TVs, and there's Red Bull tents, and I mean, there's just so much action. It's so weird. It was just like weird, but it was cool. It was interesting to watch. Is
this your first time there?
I was there, I think 3 years ago, but I think it was during the pandemic. Maybe it was 2 years ago, and it was kind of a very small scale event, and I went there, and it wasn't like this time. This was like more bigger production, but I talked to a lot of the athletes, and I got a chance to connect with them. And I also talked to Ross, who's a good friend, and at the end, and he was like, for everything that people don't like about this event, it's actually kind of cool because it's a different layer and a different element in surfing for these athletes. And they have to overcome like this mental aspect of this place and figure out how to compete on this wave that goes for a pretty good distance, that, it's strategy and it's mental in that aspect. And it's difficult, even though it is a man-made perfect wave. Like, you saw athletes fall. I mean, you were like, how do you fall? I mean, it's just, there's a ton of things going through their head. And I could see that in these athletes when they're walking to the ramp. Like, it's pretty cool, So, yeah.
It's definitely unique. Who is Ross that you were speaking of? Ross who?
Sorry, Ross Williams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And we're going back to your first time there. I'm always interested. I know that my first time there, it was mind-blowing when that thing fired up and that train moved and that first wave came through. Like, you don't realize what a grand undertaking and what a grand thing, piece of technology that they made. It's mind-blowing when you see the first wave. You're like, holy mackerel, this is way better than I anticipated.
I totally agree. It is wild. When you see that first wave, if you've never been there, it's pretty wild. It's an incredible wave. And the engineering feat on that thing is amazing. There's a ton of water moving when you're standing at the wall, and it just backwashes over that little hump. It's pretty crazy, man. It is super crazy.
Yeah, no doubt the best man-made wave out there. There's just no denying it. What about this little flare up that Gabe Medina has caused on social media? Do you have any take on that, Justin?
You know, I'm not like a super contest person where I like follow it heavy, but just being there and being around it, and I mean, I could see a point where, you know, scores maybe went a way they shouldn't have, but I'm not really a person to judge that, and everybody's bias is kind of different. I could see their point, you know, that they could be frustrated, but I think sports is kind of like that, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I think you just have to kind of better yourself and, you know, go the other way with it. I don't know how to explain it, but, you know, I can see their frustrations for sure. I think when I look at a heat and I'll watch them surf, I kind of try to score it myself. I'm like, is that better than that guy's? And I'll maybe put a mental score in my head, and then, you know, it comes out maybe way higher, and I'm like, wow, you know, that's kind of interesting. And I'm trying to analyze it and figure it out, and I'm not the expert there, you know? So, but yeah, I could see if your professional career hinges on that, it can be really frustrating. I could see where that can be really hard, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, I think that, you know, as I mentioned to somebody the other day, people have been complaining about judging in surf contests since the very first surf contest. And
yeah,
it's sort of part of the fabric of the whole competition thing. But
yeah,
but specifically for you, Justin, you brought some of your dark arts boards up there. I imagine you bring boards and help me out here, you bring boards for Felipe, for John. Who else do you bring boards up there for?
Let's see. Bear Mamiya, he's been riding them for a bit, and Kanoa Igarashi he was like one of the first ones to ride it at the pool. He was on them, and Stephanie Gilmore is now on them. We made a couple for Italo, and I talked to him, and he just didn't have enough time prior to that contest to get on them. But he said they definitely feel amazing, and I think he's going to be on them for El Salvador. From our conversation, he's excited to get on them.
Well, that's what interests me is what I'm trying to get at is when you show up, and I imagine there's some anxiety kind of welling within you. You've got all these beautiful crafts that you've poured your heart and soul into, and you show up and you've got Felipe and John and Stephanie and Baron, and they're probably like looking at standard construction, and they're looking at your boards like, is there a moment where you're like, well, we'll see which one they pick, you know, like, or do you know going up that they're all waiting for you to arrive, or they're already on your boards? Like, is there a moment where you're like, oh, bummer, they grabbed a standard PU, or, oh, killer, they're ripping on my dark arts? Like, is there that moment, or do you know going up there that these guys are settled into what you're making?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question, because there is that total anxiety and stress of, I don't know what they're going to ride. I know, I was pretty sure Philippe was going to ride his. I was pretty sure Kanoa, but 100%, like, we did one for Ethan, Italo, Stephanie. I mean, a ton of boards. I'm missing a few as well, but yeah, for sure. Like, I don't know what they're going to ride. And I was pretty sure John was going to ride his new one that we did. But yeah, it is stressful. It's super stressful. And leading up to that contest here at the shop was like, we did so many team boards for that thing, plus production. It was long days. It was long days, long weeks. And, you know, I usually don't get to connect with the athletes. So for me, going up there, talking to Stephanie, talking to Italo, and, you know, it was great because I didn't know. I thought, you know, maybe Italo wrote it and he just didn't like it. And the truth of the matter was, like, he just didn't have time, you know? So that makes me feel good because I'm usually kind of in the dark as far as like, why didn't he ride it? I don't know because I can't just really reach out and all that.
Yeah.
But it's super stressful. And then, when you watch him ride it, it's a whole nother,
that's sort of interesting, Justin, that you can't reach out and speak to the athletes. Like when I think of like Formula One guys that are building engines and cars, I imagine they're speaking directly to the drivers. And I do know you have, and forget, let me know if I'm wrong here, but I know you have a direct line with John Florence. It seems like you should have a direct line with these people, but I guess DHD and the board designers are in the middle, and they don't want you to have direct contact.
Yeah, there is a thing about that, and I understand that to a degree. But to your point, if you want to make any real progress with these athletes, communication between athlete, shaper, glasser, especially in this type of situation, to get the most out of it, more communication, the better. Actually, Darren Hanley was here at the shop yesterday. I love that guy. He's so easy to work with. And I told him just that. I said, we can make some really good progress if we keep the lines of communication open. And he was like 100% all in, no problem. Whatever you need. I was really excited about that. As far as
he's open to you, like reaching out to Ethan and reaching out to Steph.
Well, even if I don't need direct communication, I'm just telling him like, listen, if they give you communication, like I would like the board to be lighter and a little more flexible.
Yeah.
Please give me that information when we make the next one so I can create a baseline and work from that. I don't necessarily need to talk to the athlete, but if you talk to them, please let me know the feedback that you're getting so I can improve upon their board, So I get that with John. John and I, we definitely have like a closer collaboration with his stuff. I've never talked to Philippe. I've never talked to Kanoa, really. I've never talked to any of the Sharp Eye guys. So it's interesting because, all you're going off of is like, well, I guess the last one worked pretty good, so we'll just kind of glass it the same and cross our fingers, Yeah,
it is very interesting because, as you know, when we think about John Florence and carbon, I immediately think of sailing and he's kind of a like a hard goods geek, like he's into everything, every little nut and bolt of his sailboat, and I'm sure he's that way. So, and then there's other people, and frankly, I might even fall into this category. But there's other people that are like, dude, just give me the board and I'll wax it up and go ride it and we'll see what happens. Like that aren't as like technically inclined, Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. He's a super nerd when it comes to materials and his boards, and the more interesting and more out there they are, the more excited he gets, So, and it's always chasing something with him, but it keeps it really fun kind of for both of us,
So having DHD into the fold now has got to be exciting because of obviously Steph, but as well Ethan Ewing, who is arguably, the most stylish or the most together package as far as bringing everything to the wave face. Tell me about that. The Ethan Ewing thing, is he going to be riding your boards in El Salvador? Where's he at with the dark arts technology?
Yeah, I agree. He's really exciting. Just watching him at the surf ranch was really cool. And I think for him, it sounds like I need to, we're going to work a little more. Darren was here yesterday. We shaped one for him, went through that. And then I need to work on weights and flexibility with him on the build. So I don't think he'll be on them in El Salvador, but I am going to build him a couple, 2 or 3 to get under his feet soon so that we can start making some progress, and maybe for the finals day. I don't know.
When you say flex, when somebody goes, let's work on the flex, are you thinking different foams? Are you thinking different stringers or no stringers? Like what goes in, or maybe there's just less resin or a longer time in the vacuum bag process. I don't know.
Yeah. So basically I like to just do stringerless, as a base with EPS. And then as far as flex, I would look at what type of carbon or shifting the carbon at an angle. And so for Ethan, I'm going to do a non-woven, and then we're going to play with some tapes and what width those tapes are and where to put those to kind of control, give it the sense of a stringer, but still give it a lot of bend. And then I'm going to give him a board that's probably just under 5 pounds that will feel pretty lively, and see what he thinks about that, you know?
That's amazing. So I didn't even really recognize the fact that there's non-woven weaves that you're using. There's different ways that you lay them relative to horizontal or vertical on the board. There must be a ton of notes that you make when you make a board for, say, Ethan. You're like, okay, we did this. We did these 4 vertical, this 1 horizontal, and we did no weave. And like, you must have spreadsheets up the galore just to make sure that you're on top of it.
Yeah, for John, I did, and I made so many for him. I had like this book and spreadsheets. It was kind of out of control. During the pandemic, it was getting kind of crazy. But yes, for something like Ethan's, I think I definitely will have either a mental note, because it's just a couple boards, but as it gets more heavy into it, sure, we'll keep track of it. But yeah, I think, it's weird. Philippe's board is our standard dark arts build, that plain weave. It's everything we sell, and he won a world title on that. He shows up and it's incredible. Part of that is that design from Marcio, that quad fin design. But he really likes the liveliness of the carbon. I also had a really interesting conversation with Stephanie at the pool, and she's so excited about the boards. And she did ride a non-woven at Surf Ranch, and her board was really light. It was 4 pounds. Wow. Under your arm, it just feels like it's, and she said, she's like, I was a little nervous. I was thinking it was going to be too light and feathery on the face. But then when she rode it, she was like, man, it was unreal. So she rode that in the heats. It had a white top. But she's so excited because she said for her, it's the opportunity to maybe just take a handful of boards on tour, not 2 board bags. It's maybe 1 board bag. And for her, that's super exciting. And she also said at Snapper, she actually ran somebody over with the pink top board she was riding, and she broke their board. And she was like, I was devastated, and I flipped over my dark arts and there was nothing wrong with it. And from that point on, she was just like, okay, this is really cool. Like, it performs and it lasts, and that's the whole goal.
Yeah, so, for sure.
That conversation it lit me up. Like, I was so excited to hear that, it was just great.
That's pretty classic. She ran somebody over and we're all excited.
Yeah, that was her. She was devastated at one time, but she was like, wow, this is so it was cool. Cool story.
Well, look, you mentioned something that always interests me, which is the weight, 4 pounds, 5 pounds for Ethan. You've made me a couple boards, and you and I've had this discussion where I'm like, Justin, I think it's too light for me. I don't know why, I'm a 58-year-old male.
Yeah,
I didn't feel like there was any drive, and maybe I'm just not, pro level, or which is quite frankly is possible. I mean, I'm not pro level, but you and I were talking about making a PU board for me, or making a board that has more drive. I've never been an EPS guy. I've tried and tried and tried.
Yeah,
and I keep fooling myself, going, I think I would like this one, and I didn't like it. And so I just think I'm a PU guy through and through.
Yeah.
What does that mean for me? Like, do you think it's PU that makes me feel like I'm not getting any drive out of the board, like the board doesn't want to go? Or is it, I don't know, like,
yeah, I think, it's, I think a lot of people have that question. And I think from hearing feedback from the past few years with these top guys and getting their opinions, it's partly, yes, you're used to that PU sensation and that weight and feeling and that dampening. And then, when you jump on a carbon vacuum bagged EPS board, it's got this weird, like, where it kind of hangs and stalls and it doesn't want to go maybe for certain people. And I was talking to Tony here that helps at our shop and runs things. And he's like, a lot of these athletes that like it, they're like really fast moving athletes, like they're quick on their feet, and they can utilize it. And, and for John, he loves the carbon and he surfs great on it. But then when it comes to like competing on it, if he's not 100% locked in mentally, like he struggles on it. And so what I'm building for him now and what we've been working on is that carbon Kevlar board. And that is a PU core. I add a little something to the inside of that to give it a little more spice. But that board is something that like people like you would love, where it feels like a PU. That weight is a PU type of weight. It's a really good feeling PU. The core is PU, but now you have this electricity from the carbon and the carbon Kevlar that give you this kind of electric sensation. It'd be like a PU, on steroids, kind of.
Yeah.
And those guys like Ethan Ewing, he rode a PU glassed in epoxy. That's what he rode at Surf Branch. So those guys, they'll look at that wave and be like, okay, I think I need something more than a PU, but I'm not really used to the carbon yet. How can we spice it up a little bit? And it's like, well, their first go-to is just wrap it with epoxy because it gives it a little stiffness, but it gives a little more zip to it,
So do you mean a carbon layup at the epoxy resin?
No, Ethan was riding just a PU blank, and it was glassed with 4 ounce and epoxy resin.
I see. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So,
well, how far did the Dark Arts boards go at the Surf Ranch Pro? Was Felipe the guy that took the technology to the furthest at this year's event?
I think he did. Yeah. I think he took it the farthest. I can't remember if it was just the semis or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're making boards for a bunch of surfboard brands. DHD is the latest one. Sharp Eye, of course. IPA, Rusty, John Pizell, Album. How do these relationships get forged? Are guys calling you up? Are you actively marketing to these brands, or how does that work?
Yeah, they usually reach out. I've worked with Matt Album since I was in my garage, so I already have a relationship with him. I've known Marcio for 20 years, and he brought me work when I was in my garage. John Pizell, same thing, built John's first 2 out of the garage. But then everybody else has kind of reached out. We don't really actively approach. I've had Eric Arakawa reach out. I mean, I feel bad because a lot of people wanted to get involved, and it's like I don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
And I don't have the ability to do it for everybody.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like approaching the growth as like a slow grow, and try not to go too big too quick, and just it's hard.
Yeah.
It's definitely hard.
Yeah, it's probably smart though. I mean, better to do a few really good than to get overextended.
Yeah, and that's I keep telling people that, the name of this game is kind of make a product that's done really well, that performs really well. And, if we can only make X amount, it is what it is, like I'm not looking to take over the polyester market or the epoxy market. I'm just trying to create a product that falls in line for the industry, that the industry benefits from and gets healthier in a sense,
Yeah.
So
well, it's interesting. Like we spoke a little bit about Firewire at the beginning, and there are some other brands that are making carbon boards. Firewire has this, and I'm not super up to speed with it, so I'm going to sound a little ignorant, but the Thunderbolt stuff and that volcanic that Firewire is putting out seems similar, at least aesthetically, to what you're doing, or they're trying to be similar. I know that Lost has something that they're some sort of carbon lip that they're excited about. How do you feel about that? Do you see that as they're trying to come after you, or what are your feelings on that?
That's a great question, man, because when I saw that stuff in the beginning, it was kind of disheartening, because it's like, man, I put my heart and soul into this thing, and I try to just create a lane and just stay in my lane, where it's carbon top to bottom, and I want to be that best product in that marketplace for that. And then when people come out doing the same thing and making it cheaper and making it overseas, or making their color jobs look like ours, I get it, and that's the surf industry, right? And my goal is to not do that, is to not, I don't know. I'm gonna stay in my lane, and I'm just gonna do my lane the best that I can do. It's okay. Like, I think people know, the Lost boards are made in Vietnam, and they're cheaper, and there's boards that are made of carbon, and they come out of Cobra, and people get a great markup on those things when they land here in the States. But in my honest opinion, that stuff's not great for the industry. I think when you can create something that is a premium here, and you just do it well, and even if it's low volume, and it's a high priced product, and the top surfers in the world are on it, that's good for the industry. You know what I mean? I could have easily taken this thing, overseas, and mass produced it, and just flooded shops and squashed. People would hate me, you know what I mean? And I'm not in it for that. It's like, it's not money for me. It's not, anything like that. It's more like, let's make something that's positive for the industry, and do that, and do it well. You know what I mean? So
plus, from my own experience, when I've been to your factory and talked with you about boards, I get a real sense that I'm getting a custom surfboard. Like you're like, Scott, well, let's try this, and we could do this. And there's like a little bit more ingredients to the magic potion over there at Dark Arts. Like, I feel like it's not just like, yeah, I'd like a carbon surfboard, please. It's more like, hey, let's build you something crazy here, and bitchin' and fun, and let's mix this with that. And we can do this, and we can do that. Like, there's just more parts to it, or with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think Tony Curto here is on the phone every day. If you call our factory and you have a question about what to order, or what you are thinking you want to order, Tony is great, and he'll walk you through the process of what he's ridden, and his opinion, and he'll try to direct you in the right way of your purchase. And the phone rings every day, and I think it's important to have that ability to feel like you're ordering a custom, and you are. You can order custom sizes here, and we have a great shaper here, Alex, and he's going to shape it, and it's a normal factory here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not like you're ordering like a cookie cutter size, and this is what you get, and it comes in a box, and have fun. You can come here and pick up your custom Dark Arts board in person, and we'll give you a shirt, and and chat and all that, which is cool. Should be like that,
Absolutely. That's the fun. That's part of the fun.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kevlar. We touched a little bit on Kevlar. I'm sort of interested in this. I heard you mention it with on the broadcast at the Surf Ranch Pro with Peter Mel. What would a normal surfer like me, would Kevlar be something that I would consider?
So, with that whole board, and I didn't really have time to get into that whole broadcast was wild. I've never done that before. And he was like, you got to talk quick and all that. So I couldn't really get into it, but that product is basically, I'm trying to bridge the gap between our EPS Dark Arts and the sensation of a poly board. So that's that product that guys that don't like EPS, chattery maybe, their whole opinion on it doesn't work for them. They're PU lovers. That carbon Kevlar board is the answer for them. that's their dark arts answer. So it's not production ready yet. I have a couple more tweaks I'm working on with John to try and just tune it in a little more. But I'm hoping next year, for everybody that's on the fence of, you know, I don't like how those stock dark arts feel in choppy situations or whatever, this one is going to be your go. And we'll have some demos, I think, and all that. So
cool. And when do you anticipate that would be available to the general public? Any time frame on that? I know you mentioned next year, but is there like,
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like it's the hardest surfboard to make. It's really hard.
what makes it so difficult?
Well, the non-woven carbon on the bottom, it's really hard to bag onto PU, and then we don't wrap the board in fiberglass. So whenever you're dealing with Kevlar on a surfboard, if you don't cover it in fiberglass, you can't really get into it if you sand. So I can build the board. I've had a couple guys in the shop. We put a one or two through, and it's not easy. It's a hard surfboard to build. It's the hardest board I've ever made. But John really loves it. Loves it. So there's something to it, and I think it's worth. I don't think we're going to make a lot of them. We'll make 100 of them. So yeah, one of those.
I know Kevlar's been around for a while. I remember, I want to say even in the 80s. Shannon came out with some Kevlar boards. So it's obviously not new to, just sort of the, biochem, like the tech world's been using it for decades.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's about how you apply it in that sandwich. I think of maybe the surfboard build as a sandwich, and what layers you're using, to make that sandwich taste good. And, it's pretty complex. The non-woven on the bottom is going to give it this like rail to rail torsional kind of movement that gives it a different feel. But then the carbon Kevlar on the top gives it a lot of dampening with the PU blank. It all kind of just blends together to this kind of spicy, like, wow kind of board,
Yeah. And regarding PU, is there a specific brand that you like? Is there, there's Millennium and Arctic and US blanks. Is there one that you feel is more effective?
I'm not a PU blank expert. I think the guys that shape that day in and day out, I know Paizel's a Arctic fan, and there's US blanks. We use US blanks PU, and we add a little EPS. They add an EPS piece in there for us. That's what we use now, and I'm not an expert in that field, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But,
right. Well, what about, and maybe this isn't relative either, but what about dark arts tech with like a varial foam or Javier's XTR or other foams? Like, have you tried varial or XTR?
Yeah, I've vacuum bagged on varial when I was playing in my garage, and it's good foam. There's a lot of cool properties to it. So when I think about stuff like that foam, when you're dealing with that foam, it's a very like slow moving foam. When you bend it, it bends and it moves, but it moves slow. EPS reacts real fast. It's more stiff. You have to look at, if you're going to bag carbon onto a foam like that, it's going to be a whole different feel from a plain weave EPS board. Those athletes that ride our stuff, they're looking for speed and fast reacting equipment. If you bag varial foam, that foam is going to be a lot slower moving. Even when it's bagged in carbon, it's going to feel totally different. So for me, when I bag PU, that's why I add EPS. And I've tested with John wood stringers, every different width, bagged in different types of carbon. I've sliced that bread every which way I can with the top guy in the world, and it's either a no-go, or it's not good enough, or this isn't very exciting. And if he doesn't get excited, he just won't ride it, because PU for him is great. If you can't build something that's better than PU, there's no point in riding it, especially for the top guys. The fact that John's riding something that's different, he believes in it, and that's the thing with me. It's like, if I can't get John excited, if I make him a board and he's like, and I've done it, I've made him carbons where he's like, this thing just feels like a typical epoxy, not interested, and that's with a different type of carbon that's slower moving. And he's like, there's no point to him unless this thing is electric and it goes fast. And he is like, wow, it's PU, back to PU, which is, I totally understand,
Do you do a thing where when you build John a board in a certain construction, you build yourself the same exact one so that you could go surf blacks or whatever and be like, I want to kind of feel what John's talking about?
I don't, because I feel like the typical, say, an average surfer, it sounds interesting, but you're just not going to be able to connect on the same level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I give you two short boards that have an eighth of a difference of tail rocker, you're probably not going to feel the difference. John will feel the difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't, but only because I know that. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense for me. You need the top guys to validate and test equipment. You have to. I mean, you can give the average surfer a board and they'll just be like, this thing's amazing. But that, doesn't mean anything. So,
yeah. What about, and as you mentioned, John, my mind goes to pipeline and goes to big outer reefs on the North Shore. Where are we at with dark arts surfboards and big waves? Like a quiver of dark arts boards for John, like maybe even the Paizel Cadillac for surfing that outer reef left that they all go to, or Pipe or Sunset. What are your thoughts on dark arts and bigger waves? Maybe even Puerto Escondido.
Yeah, I don't think John Paizel is kind of interested in exploring that. I don't think it would do anything for him. I don't think he's excited about it, which I get. Billy Kemper reached out, I think a year or so ago, and he wrote a dark arts and he was like, I would really love to get that in a big wave gun. And I reached out to John and he did, but it just kind of went to the wayside. I think that there is something there and it could be explored. I think KT does really good stuff with, he does great stuff with Kai Lenny, and I think that's really cool. For me, I'm so busy just trying to improve the shortboard performance side with these guys that I don't have the time right now. But I think it's cool. I think there is definitely a thing there that needs to be explored,
Yeah, I agree. I could see dark arts PU just for the strength factor, like less broken boards out there.
I think in that situation, that would be fun to test, and work with those athletes. That's the fun for me, is that side of it, chasing improvements for them, squeezing out as much performance in their equipment as possible. And but it's hard, like John Paizel is super busy, and his program is his program, and I'm super fortunate and thankful that he gives me the opportunity to make boards with John. So I don't try to bug him, and
right.
Yeah.
Well, what if some big wave surfer that's on? I don't even. Let's just say like Tom Love, for instance. Well, I believe Chris Christensen's making his boards. What if somebody like that came up and said, "Hey, I would like a quiver of big wave guns. Do you just not have the time to go down that right now because you're so focused?"
No, if someone like that reached out and they said that, I would say, great. I would say, get the shapes and let's talk about what you want it to be in the end result, and I can do that for you. Absolutely. If somebody like that reached out and they said, hey, I'm going to get some shapes from Chris, and I want to get him wrapped in dark arts, I would be excited to do that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fun, but I'm not going to chase like
Right.
Figuring it out.
What about locally here? Like, do you have guys go, hey, make me or whoever, like Sharp Eye, or even you, like JT, make me a gun for blacks, and obviously in the dark arts. Like, are there no, 7-6 boards down at blacks this winter?
Yeah, we don't get a lot of big wave inquiry stuff at all, really, to be honest. It's never been that for us. It's more like just performance shortboards and kind of grovelly stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, it can be done. Like I said, I think KT does some great stuff, and that just proves that, there's something there,
No doubt.
Yeah.
What about foil boards?
I have the foil king, Kyle Knox. He's the foil king right now, and he's just like over the moon about foiling.
I know, he's got me all fired up. Believe me, I've seen his boards, and I know they're dark arts.
He's like next level. His mind, when it goes to foiling, it's out there in outer space. Like, he'll come in and talk about design and all this stuff, and it's wild. It's really cool. It's great to see passion in something like that from him. But yeah, we can do some great foil stuff. Actually, I think the foil boards that we do, from what Kyle says, are the best,
Yeah. And is that one of your designs? Is that, like, if I wanted a foil board from Dark Arts, would you just make me something that you made Kyle, or do I like reach out to my shaper and go?
Yeah, no. Yeah. So like Kyle's board, we make that board. I make that board under the JT, and that's basically the go-to foil. He's tested that thing, and we've done 3 different foil designs, and he's like, the first one's the best, and so that's kind of the go-to.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And what's going on with your musical background? You were in Vegas playing music. I know you play bass.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I kind of put a lot of my fun stuff to the wayside to just focus on dark arts. So we got invited to play punk rock bowling in Vegas, and we played this biker bar. It was like, it was actually really cool. Last time I played was a year ago, and it was just a little show, but we used to play before dark arts. I would play with all the big 90s punk bands, Strung Out, Lagwagon. I mean, all those big bands that I grew up listening to, I had the chance to play with them previous to dark arts. So yeah, we went to Vegas and did a little show, and it was fun. I love playing music. I really do. I honestly wanted to be that musician, and it's really a passion of mine, but I don't have the time, this thing consumes me. And
what, like, do you just pick up the bass and show up, or do you guys practice, or is
for that show? The guitar player lives in Colorado, and he literally just flew in 2 hours before the show, and we got on the stage and we played. And yeah, we don't really practice now. So we practice ourselves to the album, and then we go up on stage and do it. But
is it all originals that you guys have been playing forever?
Yeah, we put out an album in, I think it was 2016, and we did a lot of shows from that album.
What's the name of the band?
The band's called Skipjack, and the latest album is a soundtrack to a eulogy. And that album we played with, like, Good Riddance, Strung Out a couple times, Punk Rock Karaoke, shared the stage with like Greg Hetson and all sorts of great punk kind of legends, Yeah. And that was all prior to dark arts. I was making boards in my garage and playing a lot of music, and then it kind of took a shift where it was like, this thing has a chance. It's either you go for it and make dark arts happen, or you're just going to make a few boards in your garage and play music. So I decided to jump off the cliff with dark arts and really give it a go.
And it's been going gangbusters, man. I mean, I'm so stoked for you, right? Things are great.
Yeah, it is. It's been really hard. I'll be honest. Like it's hard, manufacturing anything custom, something new. It's difficult, it's hard, but yes, it is good. We're getting some great exposure and great partnerships, and we've aligned with the manufacturer in Australia. So we're going to start getting boards over to Australia. So that's kind of the new.
That's exciting
For us. Yeah.
Sounds like you're going to be going to Australia.
I would love to. Yes, I had the conversation this morning. I need to go over there and figure that out. And I'm still figuring out here. And I'm so busy, Scott. Like when you hit me up, I was like, I'd love to do a podcast. And you're like, how about this day? And it's like my schedule is with the two kids and taking them to school, and it's just crazy, man.
Yeah.
But,
crazy in a good way.
Yeah, for sure.
I've noticed, I believe, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I've noticed that I think there's board builders that are specifically making boards for wave pools. And I mean boards that shouldn't be ridden in the ocean. Is that the case? Is that something that you sense? And in fact, are you doing that?
It's funny that you say that, because I think Chris Russell pretty well. I think I just saw him and he said to say hi. So Chris says hi.
Cool.
But he approached me last week, and he's like, I have a couple materials that I think would be great for maybe a wave pool type board. And I think, yes, some people are doing something like that. And I think there is a build for a wave pool board, because obviously there's like a concrete bottom and they get dinged a lot and damaged. So you would need
salt water.
Yeah, so you need something that kind of bounces around without getting cracked,
Yeah.
And that's probably a Kevlar, a Negra type build, But anytime you wrap something in fiberglass, it can crack. So, and then how do you approach that sanding of the Negra Kevlars on the outside without wrapping it? It's technical,
What's the name of that company that Chris Russell works for?
Graphite Master.
Yeah, Graphite. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see, a couple more things, and then I'll let you go. I know you're a busy guy. As you know, the Boardroom International Surfboard Show, of course, presented by US Blanks. It's coming up here in October, and we're honoring Bing Copeland as the icon of foam. Any thoughts on Bing Copeland?
He's, Bing's boards are amazing, he's a legend. I'm a surfer of the 90s, so I don't have a lot of experience in that area, but
I put you on the spot, didn't I? You're like,
from a design aspect, I have the utmost respect for all those guys, Yeah. They paved the way and ground the pavement. Just as I'm trying to do this with carbon, they were the innovators and purveyors of design back then, and we all take pieces of that, I think. So that's cool. I think there's people that, they shape that style of board and make those boards today, and hats off to them. They do a good job.
Well, you probably don't know this, but 2023 marks the 50th anniversary of the licensing deal between Malcolm and Duncan Campbell, the Bonzer brothers, and Bing Copeland, to have the Bing brand and label start to make the Bonzer. That was 1973. So this year, for Best in Show, we have a category, one and only category is the Bonzer.
Cool.
And as you know, anyone can enter. It's $1,000 first prize. So any board builders that are listening to this, consider entering. But I'm telling you, Justin, because I'm expecting to see a JT Bonzer in the Best in Show. Again, it's free to enter and anyone can enter. Of course, I'm hoping that Dark Arts gets a booth, but
what if we did a carbon Kevlar Malcolm Campbell Bonzer?
That's what I'm talking about, brother. I love it. How about those guys are the judges too, by the way. Those are the two guys that are judges. They would love that.
So how about I get Malcolm to shape the Bonzer, and then I'll do a carbon Kevlar. without.
No, that's not gonna work. That's not going to work. You got to create the bonds. I know you got the chops to get it done, and that would be fun for you. I bet it'd be a fun little side project.
That'd be fun. Is Malcolm? You said Malcolm's going to be a judge?
Yeah, Malcolm and Duncan are both going to be there to judge it.
Cool. I think I've been having some conversations with Malcolm lately, and I think we're going to do a Dark Arts Malcolm Campbell kind of collab, maybe.
Sweet.
Yeah, we're going to do maybe a limited run of Malcolm Campbell boards under Dark Arts here soon.
Wow. Maybe that's what I'm going to be getting.
There you go. I think everything.
Bonds or PU Kevlar. That would be so sick.
I think a lot of people would be into it. He's such a great guy. So yeah, we're working on that as well. There's a lot of fun stuff we're working on.
All right. Well, cool. Listen, Justin, it's always great catching up with you. I know I saw you at the what's that board demo called?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. What was that?
Camp Shred.
There you go. Camping thing.
Yeah, Camp Shred. It's a killer little thing that Scott Desiderio puts on there in Cardiff. But anyway, it's like I said, it's great catching up with you. I know you're busy. Get back to work. Thanks for being with us here.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it. It was great catching up.
Okay, buddy. We'll talk soon. Talk to you later.
Sounds good. See ya.
Okay.